Discover how a boy who only wanted to play the flute ended up building the deadliest war machine in Europe. Before we start, let me know in the comments from where you are watching this video, so I can know how far it has reached. 18th century Europe knew no peace. It was a continent divided among hungry empires and crowns that disputed every inch of land, as if the world were an infinite board where the pieces were flesh and blood soldiers. Austria dominated the center. France controlled the west. Russia advanced from the east. Great Britain played from the shadows, financing wars it never fought on its own soil. And among them all, lost in the cold and arid north, was Prussia, a poor kingdom, small, landlocked, without natural wealth, without armies comparable to the great empires. A state that barely deserved to appear on the diplomatic maps of the great European chancelleries. No one bet on Prussia. No one expected that frozen piece of land to one day become the heart of an empire. No one imagined that from there would emerge a man capable of facing half of Europe and coming out victorious. That man was born on the 24th of January, 1712, in Berlin. His name was Frederick, the second of that name, son of King Frederick William I, known as the Sergeant King. A brutal man, obsessed with military order, extreme discipline, with turning Prussia into a permanent barracks. A father who despised everything his son loved. Because Frederick, since he was a child, did not want to be a soldier. He wanted to be a musician, poet, philosopher. He read in French, studied Voltaire, composed music for the flute, dreamed of an enlightened court where ideas mattered more than bayonets. But his father saw that as an unforgivable weakness. He beat him, humiliated him publicly, forbidden him from reading, torn books from his hands, and burned them, yelled that he was a disgrace to the crown, that Prussia needed strong kings, not effeminate poets. The tension between father and son grew unbearable. Frederick tried to escape, planned to flee to France with the help of his closest friend, a young officer named Hans Hermann von Katt. But they were discovered. The Sergeant King flew into a rage, arrested his own son, locked him in a fortress, and decided to give him a lesson he would never forget. Ordered Hans von Katt to be executed, and forced Frederick to witness the beheading from his cell. They say Frederick screamed, that he begged for mercy, that he tried to stop it, but it was useless. The sword fell, his friend's head rolled on the ground, and something inside Frederick died that day. He learned that in Prussia, weakness was a luxury no one could afford, that to survive he had to hide his true self. That power was not obtained with beautiful words, but with iron and blood. From then on, he submitted, obeyed his father, learned military tactics, studied the campaigns of the great generals in history: Alexander, Caesar, Hannibal, Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. But he never stopped reading Voltaire in secret, never abandoned the flute. He just learned to hide that part of himself, to build a mask, the mask of the soldier king everyone expected to see. When his father died in 1740, Frederick inherited the throne. He was 28 years old. Europe looked down on him. They saw a weak king, intellectual, without real military experience, a philosopher playing at ruling. No one took him seriously. No one expected him to last long. Diplomats bet on how soon he would lose Silesia, Pomerania, or even Brandenburg. The European courts were already preparing treaties to divide Prussia like a cake. But Frederick surprised them all. Instead of waiting for the attack, he attacked first. Just 7 months after being crowned, he invaded Silesia, a rich region, fertile, full of mines and prosperous cities. It belonged to the Austrian Empire, then ruled by Maria Theresa, a woman as intelligent as proud. The invasion was a diplomatic scandal, a blatant provocation. Prussia was a dwarf challenging a giant. Everyone expected Austria to crush Frederick in weeks. But Frederick did not fight like the others. He did not follow the old rules of war, did not wait for spring to move his troops, did not form long, slow columns that took weeks to move. His army marched fast, very fast, moved by night, attacked at dawn, used secondary roads, surprised the enemy where they least expected. His infantry was trained to perfection. They could fire 4 times a minute when other armies barely managed to. His lines were compact, disciplined, deadly. Prussian artillery was mobile, light, could reposition during battle while others were stuck in the mud. Frederick did not win just by courage. He won by precision, by speed, by cold calculation. In the Battle of Mollwitz, his first great victory, he almost lost. The Austrian cavalry destroyed his. Frederick had to flee the field to avoid capture. But his infantry resisted, fired, advanced, held the line until the Austrians withdrew exhausted. And Frederick learned the lesson. He would never again rely only on cavalry. Never again underestimate the importance of coordination among all arms. He won Silesia. Austria signed a humiliated peace, but did not forget. Maria Theresa swore to recover what was lost. Spent years preparing alliances, seeking support, building coalitions, and she succeeded. France, Austria's traditional enemy, decided to ally with her. Russia too. Saxony joined. Sweden took the chance to attack from the north. Even the Holy Roman Empire turned against Prussia. Frederick was surrounded. Alone, against half of Europe. It was the year 1756. The 7 Years' War began. The war that would define Europe's future. The war that would make Frederick legend or ash. The first years were brutal. Frederick attacked first, as always. Invaded Saxony. Defeated the Austrians in Prague. But then came Cologne. A devastating defeat. Lost thousands of men. Had to retreat. The Russians invaded from the east. The French from the west. The Swedes from the north. Prussia was being devoured alive. At Rossbach he faced a French and Austrian army twice the size of his own. 41,000 enemy soldiers against 22,000 Prussians. But Frederick maneuvered, feigned a retreat, made the enemy advance disordered, thinking he was fleeing, then attacked their flank with his cavalry, shattered their lines, scattered them in less than 2 hours. It was a massacre. The French lost 10,000 men. Frederick only 500. A month later, at Leuthen, he faced the Austrians again. 65,000 against 33,000. Again outnumbered. But Frederick used a risky tactic. Attacked obliquely. Concentrated all his strength on a single enemy flank while keeping the rest engaged. Broke the Austrian line like a hammer breaking glass. Made them flee. Captured thousands. Recovered Silesia. He seemed invincible. But he was not. At Kunersdorf, he faced Russians and Austrians united. Almost won. Almost. But he made a mistake. Kept attacking when he should have withdrawn. Lost 18,000 men in a single day. More than half his army. Wrote desperate letters. Thought of suicide. Carried poison in his pocket in case he was captured. But he did not surrender. Regrouped. Recruited. Attacked again. Because he understood something his enemies did not. That Prussia had no choice. Either it won or disappeared. There was no middle ground. No honorable surrender. It was survive or die. For 7 years he fought against everyone. Lost battles. Lost cities. Berlin was occupied twice. Its fields lay devastated. Economy collapsed. Hundreds of thousands died. Prussia bled for every wound. But it stood. Because Frederick never gave up. Never. And then the miracle happened. In 1762 the Russian Empress Elizabeth died. Her successor, Peter III, admired Frederick. Immediately signed peace. Withdrew his troops. The coalition fell apart. France was exhausted. Austria too. All signed treaties. The war ended. Prussia had survived. More than that. It had won. Kept Silesia. Consolidated as a power. Europe no longer laughed. Now it respected. And feared. Frederick returned to Berlin as a hero. But he was a broken man. 50 years old and looked 70. Suffered constant pain. Gout. Asthma. Insomnia. Had lost almost all his teeth. No longer played the flute as before. Lived surrounded by dogs because he no longer trusted people. But he did not stop working. Rebuilt Prussia. Drained swamps. Founded villages. Attracted immigrants. Built roads. Modernized agriculture. Established schools. Reformed laws. Abolished judicial torture. Promoted religious tolerance. Allowed Catholics, Protestants, and Jews to live in peace. He invited Voltaire to live at his court. They discussed philosophy until dawn. Spoke of reason. Of enlightenment. Of how to govern justly. But the relationship ended badly. Voltaire grew tired of Prussian authoritarianism. Frederick tired of his arrogance. They parted as enemies. Because Frederick was a living contradiction. Spoke of liberty but ruled with an iron hand. Promoted education but kept peasants tied to the land. Abolished torture but sent men to die by the thousands. Read philosophers but built cannons. Prussia under Frederick was a total military state. The army did not defend the country. The country existed to maintain the army. 1 in 12 Prussians served in the armed forces, a proportion higher than any other European country. Nobles commanded, peasants obeyed. Discipline was absolute. Punishments brutal. Desertion meant death. But it worked. Prussia became a respected power. When in 1772 Russia and Austria decided to partition Poland, they invited Frederick to join. And he accepted. No war. No bloodshed. Only diplomacy. Gained huge territories. Connected his separated provinces. Prussia grew. Frederick died on the 17th of August, 1786. Alone. In his Sanssouci palace. Surrounded by dogs and servants. Without family. Without direct heirs. His last wish was to be buried alongside his dogs. But he was buried in the Potsdam garrison church next to his father. The father who had tortured him. A cruel irony. He left a transformed country. From poor kingdom to European power. From mediocre army to perfect machine. From secondary state to main player. But he also left a dark legacy. The idea that only military force guaranteed survival. That war was not a last resort, but a normal political tool. That the state must be barracks before community. That legacy would resonate for centuries. Prussia would become the core of Germany. Prussian militarism a national doctrine. Frederick's victories a model to follow. And 100 years later, another Prussian named Otto von Bismarck would unify Germany with blood and iron. Using exactly the lessons Frederick taught. Even later, when Europe burned twice in world wars, some would point to Frederick as the origin. As the man who planted the seed of German militarism. Who made war a culture. Who made the army a state within the state. But others defended him. Said he only did what was necessary. That Prussia was surrounded by enemies. That without a strong army, it would have disappeared. That he did not invent war, but learned to survive it. That his true achievement was not the battles, but the reforms. Education. Tolerance. Rule of law. Both were right. Frederick was both. Enlightened and warrior. Philosopher and tyrant. Builder and destroyer. A deeply contradictory man trapped between what he was and what he had to be. Maybe he never wanted to be a soldier king. Maybe he only wanted to play his flute in peace. Read his books. Write poetry. Talk to thinkers. Live like the philosophers he admired. But 18th century Europe did not allow that luxury. Not to a king of Prussia. Not surrounded by hungry empires. So he hid the poet. Freed the soldier. And conquered his place in history with gunfire and corpses. Europe was never the same again. The balance of power changed. Ancient dynasties trembled. Old empires understood that size did not guarantee victory. That discipline was superior to numbers. That speed defeated tradition. Frederick the Great was not the greatest man of his time. Nor the wisest. Nor the most just. But he was the most effective. The one who turned weakness into strength. Fear into strategy. Pain into determination. And when he died, he left behind an empire forged in battles. A country that was an army. A culture that glorified war. A legacy that would inspire and torment generations. Because in the end, Frederick proved something terrible and true. That a man sufficiently broken can change the world. That trauma turned into will moves mountains. That from the deepest wounds arise the most destructive forces. The boy who cried while his friend was beheaded became the king who beheaded empires. The musician who loved beauty created the most efficient death machine of his time. The philosopher who dreamed of reason built a state where only obedience ruled. And Europe, which had laughed at him, ended up trembling at his name. Frederick the Great. The king who never wanted to be won. The soldier who hated war. The conqueror who only wanted peace. His life was proof that sometimes history is not made by those who want it. It is made by those who have no choice but to make it. And so Prussia, that poor and forgotten northern kingdom, became a power. Not by destiny, not by resources, but because a broken man decided that if the world was a battlefield, then he would learn to fight better than anyone. And he won, no matter the cost.